Welcome to Agatha Christie She Watched, our spoiler-heavy look at the movie and TV adaptations of the mystery genre's greatest writer. I'm Bill Peschel of Peschel Press, publisher of the annotated novels of Agatha Christie, and today we're talking about sleazy Argentinians, ballroom dancers, ambitious girl guides, and old fools. It's The Body in the Library, the 2004 episode from Agatha Christie's Miss Marple, starring Geraldine McEwan as Miss Marple. But first, let me introduce not my Miss Marple.
But the talent!
And all that entails.
Yes, which is why we were having a discussion earlier about should the talent play with the equipment.
That's right, and risk breaking it. So, as you can tell, this is my partner in marriage as well as crime of the fictional kind, Teresa. How you doing, Teresa?
Hi, love. It's always a pleasure to be here with you in the little office under the stairs, especially on the wet, slushy, snowy day it is outside, and we're inside where it's warm and dry.
This is one of the benefits of living at home, is that I can look out the window with my hot cup of tea and say, I don't have to drive in this Pennsylvania weather.
I know. I'm so happy that neither of us have to set foot off the property.
Instead, we get to sit here and talk about The Body in the Library.
Yes. Boy, Agatha really threw down the gauntlet with that one. A great classic mystery trope. Where is the body? Why, it's in the library. I think that's in the Clue game. I think you have one of the rooms is the library, and you can get the body in the library. And there it is right there on the title.
That's great when you're the first to be able to use these things.
And she did it fresh and new again, and beautiful misdirection. It's a great novel. She was at her peak in the 30s and 40s. Almost everything she wrote in that time period is outstanding, and this is no exception. This is the second time that we've seen the 2004 Body in the Library, and it showed all of the pluses and all of the flaws of ITV's Marple, which is the production values are fabulous. My God, it looks fantastic. Oh, it is just absolutely wonderful. They generally cast pretty well. They actually used a wider range of actors, so not all of the young men and women looked like Barbie and Ken dolls. Gorgeously acted, very sumptuous sets, good background music. We even got a theme from like Zardoz, which I guess is
classical theme.
Something classical. You're moving right along, really enjoying it and thinking, wow, this is great. And then in the last 15 minutes, the ending collapses completely, which is the same thing that they did with Nemesis, where they completely rewrote Miss Marple's story into a bus tour of English high life.
English country homes.
English country homes, and then you end up with crazy nuns. Yes, you end up with crazy nuns.
Nunneries that apparently they couldn't be bothered to empty out when they closed the place.
I know. I was really, really grooving on that ITV Marple, too, right up until the last 15 minutes when the story completely collapsed. And that's what happened here. I just can't accept how they changed the ending. I mean, on occasion, I have watched Agatha Christie adaptations where they have changed the identity of the murderer. I am looking at you, Sarah Phelps, and Ordeal by Innocence, where you rewrote the murderer, but you rewrote enough of the plot to make it plausible. And it was always plausible because Leo Argyle was a jerk. Here,
we'll get into that. All things do in their time. We'll get into the ending here, but let's set it up because as the title indicates, there is a body in the library, the body of a young woman at Gossington Hall,
which is the home of Dolly and Arthur Bantry. They are longtime friends of Miss Marple. Dolly Bantry in particular actually shows up in two Marples that I know of. The Body in the Library and The Mirror Cracked from Side to Side, when Dolly Bantry is widowed and she sells the huge house to Marina Gregg, movie star.
Right. She shows up in the short stories too, doesn't she?
Yes, the Bantrys do show up on occasion in the short stories.
Right, so this takes place in St. Mary Mead.
Yes, it does. One of the interesting things about how Agatha wrote, and her publisher didn't pay any attention to it at the time, and neither did she, but she never really took full advantage of continuing characters. She just really didn't. So it is nice when you see someone more than once like Dolly Bantry, because it gives you more of a sense that Miss Marple is part of a larger community, instead of all of these fly-by-night relatives who show up because the plot demands it and then they disappear again, never to be heard from again.
Well, it's especially nice when it's well cast, like having Joanna Lumley as Dolly Bantry and giving her room to fly and exercise her immense charisma and her comic timing. It just added a charge to this episode.
Oh, yes. Really, really good. Really liked her. Actually, she's in 3 separate Agatha Christie films, to my knowledge, because there's this one, of course, ITV's The Mirror Cracked, but that's a different Miss Marple, the same Dolly Bantry, but a different Miss Marple. She was also in Innocent Lies, which was
sadly misused. That was
truly a dreadful film in every way.
So we have the body in the Gossington Hall Library, and of course,
discovered by the maid who sees, oh my God, there's this beautiful young girl with platinum blonde hair and scarlet painted nails, the hussy, and she's wearing this sparkly dress, strangled on the tiger skin rug.
When Colonel Melchett comes around, who's, I guess, the local magistrate, and takes, Arthur aside and says, you're involved in, I understand we're men of the world.
Yes. Do you know this girl, and how well do you know this girl? And it is going to be a problem because everyone is going to assume that you know this girl.
Of course he doesn't. Now, there's a difference here between how this was treated here, how Arthur was treated by the villagers here, and in the original one, because in the original, we actually see Arthur getting
snubbed
by the villagers. And here, it was more of a red herring.
Yeah, when you say how Arthur is being treated, you're talking about the Joan Hickson version, right, which took more time.
Yeah, that was over several episodes.
That was much longer. ITV has to move along smartly because they only have 90 minutes. They never get more. And 90 minutes is not a lot of time. On occasion, though, I have to say that there was time that they could have spent on character development, and instead we saw ocean waves washing up on the shingle. And I'm thinking, why am I seeing ocean waves washing up on this pebbly beach? Only need one. I know they're at the seaside. Give me some plot to explain why you made the choice that you did at the end.
So Miss Marple, of course, is on the scene. Dolly drags her in because, of course, she's good friends. And here she acts more like the Watson than in other episodes, right down to the parody of Watson that shows up in the Sherlock Holmes short stories.
Oh my God, you're so wonderful. Isn't she great? Wow, look at her go. Oh my gosh. Oh, Jane, you are so clever. Oh my God, Jane, you are so brilliant. Oh, can anybody understand the depths of human iniquity better than Jane Marple? Oh, well, over and over.
And also she is a woman, of course, Miss Marple, and she recognizes something male detectives wouldn't have recognized about the body.
Because there were 2 important features on the body in the library. And the first is that Jane apparently recognizes that the dress isn't new. And when girls go out to meet their boyfriends, they wear their best dress, because you aren't going to wear something old and tattered when you're going out on the town. You're going to wear something nicer, as nice as you can afford. The other thing Jane notices, besides the fact that she's very, very young, is that the fingernails, although they are glamorous red, the girls' fingernails have been bitten off. And usually girls who wear a great deal of makeup take a great deal of time and trouble over their fingernails. Nail biting is a very hard habit to break, but if you start doing your nails on a regular basis with nail polish, you either stop wearing nail polish because you're biting it off, or you stop biting your nails. There is no in-between. Most people with bitten nails do not paint their nails. It just doesn't work well, because you pick it off and then your nails look diseased and you chew on them and you're eating nail polish, which is really nasty. But this is something she notices that the detective do not notice.
This also comes into play later when they discover fingernail clippings in Ruby Keene's dressing room. And Ruby Keene is a dancer at the hotel that is turned up missing. So the detectives were looking through her dressing room and finding fingernail clippings in the wastepaper basket.
Ruby red. They are blood red fingernails. And again, Agatha doesn't really spend a lot of time developing this. I guess she figured that the audience would work it out on their own. But when you are looking at fingernail clippings, they have a nice, neat edge, and clipped fingernails, even clipped really short, do not have the roughness that bitten nails do. And if Ruby Keene had long, glamorous fingernails, why would she cut them off? Unless one of them tore and she had to make them all shorter. But again, you would cut the nails only as short as you had to. You wouldn't clip them all back to the nubs. You don't do that.
Now you have to remind me, how were they able to connect the body in the library to, let's see, it's the Grand Hotel, the Majestic Hotel.
The Majestic Hotel.
In Eastbourne. Because it was done earlier than, obviously, our murderer intended.
Well, what our murderess, I should say, what our murderess intended, our team of murderesses intended, was that the body would be discovered in front of the fireplace in the living room of Basil Blake, Loesch film producer, with the live-in platinum blonde girlfriend who he recently moved to St. Mary Mead. He lives on the outskirts, and he already has a bad reputation in the neighborhood because of riotous parties and
General Loesch
reputation and not fighting in the war like he should have, so that there are issues with that. And they wanted the body to be discovered there because then you have an obvious suspect at once as to who would have murdered Ruby Keene. And Josie is not the person, and she wasn't expecting this either, I think. Josie was not the person who called the police. Josie is Ruby Keene's aunt.
Yeah, aunt? Okay.
Aunt or cousin.
Because she referred to Ruby as a cousin.
Okay, so she's her cousin. She's Ruby's older cousin.
Right. Josie Turner dances at the Majestic Hotel in Eastbourne.
Yes, so she is a bridge hostess. This is when hotels were expected to do more than provide you with a clean bed. They were expected to provide you with entertainment. It's almost like being on a really high-end cruise ship, I guess, where there is entertainment. She puts on exhibition dancing with Raymond Starr, and she is a bridge hostess. So that means that any gentleman there who wants to dance, if she is available, she will be dancing with total strangers to keep them company. She's not a taxi dancer. She plays bridge, and she probably also plays backgammon and a wide variety of other card games and board games to keep the guests entertained.
Let's face it, at the time, there wasn't a whole lot to do at the seaside, particularly at night. There's no nightclubs, there's no parties anywhere. It was the same thing Agatha discovered in the spa town when she fled during her 11-day disappearance, because they had a house band there.
Oh, Harrogate?
At Harrogate, yeah. They would dance and...
Oh, yeah, the hotel would have a ballroom with an orchestra, and in fact, the Majestic is very nice because they actually have 2 orchestras, if you're paying attention. Oh, yes, because you had the dance band in uniforms behind the podiums, I guess. On the bandstand for the evening ballroom dancing, live music every night, when you could still make a career as a musician. During the day, when you see Miss Marple in the Palm Court having tea, there is a string quartet of ladies in evening wear playing their violins and violas. Mm-hmm. So that there's always beautiful, real music. They are not playing tapes. They are not playing records. It is real live music, which means that you could go up to the string quartet and say, I would really like to hear some Liszt. And they say, okay. So that's what Josie Turner does, is she is entertaining the guests, but she is entertaining them in a ladylike manner. She sprains her ankle, and I would think after a month you would be able to dance on your ankle again, but what do I know? She strains her ankle badly, so she has to get her cousin Ruby to keep the business in the family. She has to get Ruby out there to the hotel to dance because she can't dance anymore. And they have to do the exhibition dancing. And Raymond Starr, like Josie Turner, has a real job at the hotel. His job is entertaining the guests. He dances with the unaccompanied ladies. He dances with the ladies whose husbands refuse to dance, plays cards. He keeps people's spirits up. He is amusing. He is witty. He is gallant. And it's made very clear that he also entertains the ladies who want it after hours privately in their hotel room. And I guess he's thinking that, hey, all cats are gray in the dark. When Ruby Keene turns up missing, Josie isn't the one who calls the police. She tells everybody, oh, you know how girls are. They just run off, and I didn't think anything of it, that she had run off with a man. And it's Ruby Keene's friend, one of the guests, Conway Jefferson, who insists on calling the police. He's the only person who sees Ruby Keene for what she is, which is that she is this relatively naive 17 or 18-year-old girl. And she's not that bright, and she enjoys spending time in Conway Jefferson's company, and you can see this episode didn't bring it out very well, and I think that Joan Hickson really made a mistake in that what you saw was everyone's contempt for Ruby Keene. They weren't quite so contemptuous here. But I see why Ruby Keene really liked Conway Jefferson. He was a nice old man who didn't put his hands down her dress. As an 18-year-old blonde who has to be nice to the male guests, she has to consider this. Even if she is not that smart, she has to consider that the male guests have one thing on their mind, and there's even a scene in this episode where she is dancing with Basil Blake, and he keeps moving his hand down to caress her rear end while they are dancing, and she keeps moving his hand back up because she is not that kind of a girl. She is not a taxi dancer. This is not that kind of a hotel. So when you look at Ruby Keene with Conway Jefferson, she isn't just entertaining a guest like it's her job. He's a nice old man. And she probably doesn't think anything of it because if she was a gold digger, she'd be smarter about it. And in fact, in the novel, they make a point, the hotel manager and certainly Raymond Starr make a point of saying Ruby wasn't that smart. In a hotel like this, the staff all know what's going on. They all know. They all either live within walking distance or they actually live on the grounds in some, garret room or some basement room because you have to have the staff on call continuously. If Ruby Keene was entertaining hotel guests, they would have known, and she would have been kicked out.
Yeah, if she was walking out with somebody in town, they would have known. They would have seen where she's gone or who shows up at the door to pick her up.
And there's a difference, and yes, it's that wonderful double standard. There is a difference between Raymond Starr entertaining ladies of a certain age who are hotel guests and who know what they want, an 18-year-old who will make a fuss if they end up with a hotel guest and then end up pregnant.
Of course, Basil Blake, having been seen with Ruby, would be considered a suspect.
And especially if the body was found in his house.
It was a very lucky break for our murderers to take the body all the way out to St. Mary Mead and find the house empty.
Yes, but they knew enough about Basil Blake because, again, people talk. They did their homework and knew that Basil Blake and his wife, Dinah Lee, were out every night at parties and would come back staggering in so drunk that they would basically collapse in a heap in their bed.
Also, another little interesting side note about that is that Basil Blake and his blonde cookie,
Dinah Lee,
is using her maiden name so that they could scandalize the normies.
But they are married.
But Miss Marple recognized they were married.
Yes.
I love the way that little scene played out.
Yes, right out of the novel, you have to be married to someone to fight like that because you know the other person can't just walk out. And they recognize this. And when Basil Blake is arrested by the police, he goes to Dinah Lee before he's dragged off. He says, "Go to my mother, tell her the truth about us, get a lawyer." He is not quite as an incompetent Loesch film producer as he looks like. He obviously has something on the ball. Certainly he has something on the ball in order to pay for that white modernist monstrosity, which we have seen before. I am sure we have seen that house before in a Poirot.
Probably has shown up. It's Shrubs Wood in Chalfont St. Giles. So.
It's always interesting when you see the class divide come out in an Agatha Christie. Remember Larry Niven's definition that people who confuse the author with the author's characters, there is an actual dictionary word to describe that, and that word is idiot. When you watch this, the Joan Hickson episode was much more flagrant about this. People despise Ruby Keene for various reasons. Josie doesn't think much of her cousin, despite the fact that she needs her cousin in order to keep her job. The hotel manager thinks that she's not that bright, but she does her job well, and she doesn't cause trouble. Raymond Starr does not think that she is that clever. Adelaide Jefferson, who is Conway Jefferson's daughter-in-law, and Mark Gaskell, who is Conway Jefferson's son-in-law, they don't like Ruby Keene because they think she's a grasping gold digger, but if she was a grasping gold digger, she'd have done a better job.
She did good enough because Conway wanted to redo his will and leave her £50,000.
He wanted to adopt her as a daughter.
Yeah.
You can kind of understand his logic because he was desperate. He was lonely. He knew that his daughter-in-law and son-in-law were going to be moving on. His own children were dead. He had no grandchildren. His wife is dead. He lost his legs in the accident. And here's this cute, fluffy little blonde girl who reminds him of his daughter. Someone actually makes a point of saying that. And she doesn't want anything from him except his company. "Oh, this is so nice. Oh, you're showing me things I've never seen before." It's very obvious she's not putting the moves on him.
Yeah.
What a nice old man. He's not expecting anything from me but my company.
Yeah. although he gets suspicious when he finds Basil Blake's photo in her purse.
Yeah, Basil Blake's photo falls out. And again, this is where you can see that Ruby Keene is not that bright and not that imaginative. She looks at the picture and she's not quite sure who it is, and then she remembers, and she doesn't even question how it got into her purse. She just assumed, oh, it's in my purse. I don't know why.
Well, and she says, oh, he put it in there.
Yeah, she assumes
boys are going to be boys.
Yeah, she assumes that he put it in there because he wants her, but it never even crosses her mind that someone else would have done it other than Basil Blake.
Right, or that anybody would have reason to be jealous of her or be suspicious of her.
Yeah, she does not think that way.
Mm-hmm.
She does not think that way. And we're all at the Majestic Hotel where Arthur Bantry is still back at Gossington Hall, drifting through his days. And again, 90 minutes is not a long time. So all of his being snubbed by the villagers about, oh my God, you brought a blonde home and strangled her in your own hearthrug, in your own library. That was not very smart of you.
Why would they suspect him of doing this? But, oh, well, if there's
there's no smoke without fire. All of that's gone. But again, 90 minutes doesn't give you a lot of time. So almost all of the film takes place at the Majestic Hotel once Dolly Bantry realizes that Conway Jefferson, who is the one who called the police, oh, I know him.
Right.
Distantly, not that well, but I know him, and let's go to the seaside, and then we can find out more.
Which allows Dolly Bantry to talk to Conway and Miss Marple, too, as well, and we just get scenes of them at the hotel, and we forget this takes place sometime after the war is over. They're still using ration coupons.
Oh,
right?
yes, there's a scene where Miss Marple has to hand over her ration book to the hotel desk clerk, and it's because they have to keep track of how much butter Miss Marple eats, how many eggs she eats.
Yeah.
And in the novel, there is a mention that with the Jefferson family, they are so rich that essentially if they want it, they just buy it from the black market. They can get what they want because they're rich. Other people, not so much. So there they are at the hotel and spending time with Conway Jefferson. And there were scenes where, again, if you were not filming the water coming up across the pebbles on the beach, you would have had time for actual plot. So there's this scene where Dolly Bantry is talking to Adelaide Jefferson, the daughter-in-law, and Adelaide confesses to Dolly Bantry that there is someone that I've started feeling fond of, and I've come to realize what a really nice man Mark is. I know that he is Conway's son-in-law, and I'm Conway's daughter-in-law, but we're separate people, and, there's no close connection. And then later on, Dolly says, I knew it was all a lie. Well, how did you know that?
Well, she's covering up because Miss Marple finally says, and I guess we can just go ahead and jump to the end, because it's not Mark.
It's not Mark Gaskell secretly married to Josie Turner like it is in the novel. It is Adelaide carrying on a flagrant lesbian affair with Josie Turner, and the two of them murdered Ruby Keene, and I couldn't accept it because it just felt so stupid that, first off, this is 1950 and you're going to be doing this, and by now Adelaide has been married to two different men, and one would assume that after the first marriage, that if she didn't really care to be with a man, well, she didn't have to remarry. She didn't have to. Or I guess she did because she needed somebody to take care of her and pay her bills, so that's why she married a second time.
She marries the second time to the son of Conway Jefferson.
Because she wanted to marry a rich man, which does not say much for her character. No, it's her and Josie having this torrid lesbian affair, and you don't see even so much as a longing glance. There is no setup for this at all until Miss Marple says, oh, I knew it was a woman's touch. Well, yeah, Josie Turner planned all of this, but why would you factor in Adelaide? We never see anything. We don't see one single thing that implies that Josie and Adelaide were having a torrid affair. They were madly in love, and they needed all of the money, which is why they murdered two 18-year-old girls so that they wouldn't be poor.
Yeah. Well, and one of them was probably not 18, because if you're in the Girl Guides.
That's right.
She would have to be younger, probably 15 or 16.
Yeah, Pamela was probably 15. She was 15 or 16, no older than that. And they chose her because they saw her coming out of the movie theater, and she was the right height and of general appearance.
Mm-hmm.
Again, this was not really well spelled out in the episode at all. I can't say that it was spelled out any better in the novel, but I know that Agatha would have done a better job than they did on the ITV production. But there's Miss Marple looking at the body in the library, and she looks at the spangly dress and realizes that it is not new. It is an older dress.
Right.
And then she looks at the bitten fingernails and the heavy-duty makeup, and the bitten fingernails do not go with the heavy-duty makeup. And then she finds out over time that this is Ruby Keene. This is Ruby Keene, a dancer at the Majestics, a ballroom dancer. Identified by Josie. And when she sees the dresses in Ruby Keene's closet, she realized that this was an old dress. This isn't Ruby Keene's best dress. This is an older dress. It is not the best dresses because they are still there in the closet. And as she says, girls don't go meet their boyfriends in an older dress. They wear their very best dress.
I think there was even a comment that she could have just worn the dress she danced in.
That's right. She could have worn the dress she danced in instead of changing into something older. And then that leads to the question of, is that Ruby Keene? The only reason we know this is Ruby Keene is because Josie said it was. But what if it's not Ruby Keene? The dress isn't right, and the fingernails aren't right for somebody who has to present this kind of appearance. Why would Josie say, this is Ruby Keene? And then everything flows from there until you start thinking, why would Josie do this? Josie must have a reason for lying. And then, of course, you discovered that there's Pamela Reeves' Girl Guide disappears, and the car is found in the quarry, set on fire with the body in it.
Which belongs to George Bartlett.
Which belongs to George
David Wallams.
Yes, and that was funny, too.
That was a good performance.
It was a very good performance from David Walliam, and it's especially interesting because we've also seen him as Tommy Beresford in The Secret Adversary and N or M. And they were... Well, they looked really good. Great eye candy, but man, they were absolutely terrible. We have other issues
we'll save
with
that for another episode. Because we're going to see The Secret Adversary later, so we'll talk about it.
I know. Then. Oh, God, save us.
But anyway, the body is found in his car, which has been stolen, and of course, she's burned up to a crisp, which makes identification almost impossible.
Well, they would have to go with dental records.
Right.
And see, that's something, again, when Josie Turner identified, and this is why a novel like this, I don't know that it would work in this day and age, because today, if you're there in the coroner's office and you're looking at the body and you say, it's my cousin Ruby, they'll take your word for it, but then they'll check. They'll do DNA verification. They'll look at dental records. They'll look at fingerprints. They'll look at something, anything else as verification, because people lie all the time. But these people, they just said, oh, it must be so-and-so.
It's far more plausible in their time in the 50s, late 40s, early 50s, than it would be today.
The same thing with finding the body of Pamela Reeve in George Bartlett's car, burned to a crisp in the quarry. They find the Girl Guide pin and assume that this must be the missing Girl Guide. But why did she go missing, and why was she burned to death in a car? And, you start asking these questions. This is where Miss Marple thinks, could the two be connected? Because it's very... Even in Christie land, where bodies are piled up like cordwood, it's still very unusual to have two young girls of a similar age and build disappear at the same time.
Well, this is also a case where their plot to implicate Basil really fell apart, because without being able to implicate Basil, the major suspects are, of course, Conway Jefferson's in-laws. And
yes.
They both have alibis. So the suspicion falls on them much, much sooner than it otherwise would have, particularly because you don't have this open and shut case against Basil Blake where there's the body in his living room. No, the body is in Gossington Hall. And why is the body in Gossington Hall? Because he came staggering home drunk, and he didn't like Colonel Bantry and thought, I gotta get rid of the body. Wife comes home.
Yeah, I got to get rid of the body before the wife comes home. Hi, Madeline. And
that's our cat, by the way.
Yes, Madeline ambled in to see what we were doing. But he has to do something about the body, and he's drunk enough to think that it would be a fun prank to leave the body in that stuffy Arthur Bantry's library, because I don't like that man. He looks down on me. He doesn't like me. And let him explain to the police where this blonde in a sparkly dress came from.
Mm-hmm.
And that throws the entire plot into arrears.
And it worked. It was a very funny sequence.
Oh, yes, it really worked. It was all very
dark
funny.
Comedy of it.
Like I said, right up until the last 15 minutes when the plot completely fell apart and you discover that it is not Josie and Mark Gaskill, which I could understand because that's normal. Mark Gaskill married Josie secretly because they fell in love. The Jefferson family had stayed at the Majestic on a regular basis. And he wanted to move on, but he knew that Conway Jefferson was a control freak who didn't want him to move on. Could almost see the way that they were thinking, that they wanted to get rid of Ruby so that she couldn't be adopted and inherit a large chunk of the money. And then soon thereafter, like within a few months of Ruby's death, then Conway Jefferson would have a fatal heart attack. And then Mark Gaskill would get most of the money and Adelaide would get the rest. This would be a long-term plan. It would take months to come to fruition, but it would work. They wouldn't have to split the money with Ruby Keene in any way, shape, or form. And you could understand Mark Gaskill wanting to marry Josie Turner. And there are little hints in the novel that they know each other perhaps just a touch better than you would think for a hotel staffer and a regular hotel guest. But here you get nothing. You get nothing. And remember, when you are watching that heart-rending scene as Adelaide is being dragged through the hallways of the jail, Josie hears her in the cell and they're crying, "Oh, I love you. I love you. Oh, Adelaide. Oh, Josie, I love you madly." They murdered 2 teenage girls because they didn't want to be poor.
And they were going to murder an old man, too.
And they were going to murder an old man because they did it. Yes, triple murders because they didn't want to be poor.
We don't have a problem here with lesbian murderesses.
Because lesbians can be murderesses, just like gay men can be murderers, just like anybody can murder anyone else. Poirot or Miss Marple would tell you, if the situation is right, you'd be surprised what people are capable of doing.
Right, and we don't have that problem in an Agatha Christie episode either. I think it was Mark Aldridge in his book called it a conservative objection to this.
It wasn't conservative.
It wasn't conservative.
It wasn't set up properly.
It wasn't set up properly, and it detracted from the overall tragedy. It became a titillation, especially when you get to see them kiss on the beach before Josie goes out.
Sprains her
ankle. There's that titillation effect. Because these are both very pretty women, and, who doesn't want to see 2 lesbians kiss? Maybe I better edit that out. This might go into a different weird area here. But the point, though, is that it detracts from the solution and the tragedy of the families.
And it is a tragedy because, again, you think about Peter Carmody he's probably about 10 or so. He is Adelaide's son from her first husband. Her first husband never even met him because he was killed during the war, probably while she was the baby was only a few months old, or maybe he hadn't even been born yet. There's Adelaide. She has her son Peter, whom she is supposedly devoted to. Mm-hmm. Husband number 1 dies in the war. Husband number 2 dies with the V2 bomb, again from the war, so she's been widowed twice. Then she decides that in order to take better care of her son, because she's worried that Conway Jefferson won't leave any money to Peter because he's not a blood grandchild, that she's going to murder 2 teenage girls and make sure that he has a tragic heart attack. There just wasn't enough setup for this. It was just like out of the blue. And then there's Peter Carmody, 10 years old. Oh, yes, your mother is having a lesbian affair. And, by the way, she murdered 2 teenage girls and tried to murder the only person you see as your grandfather. What happens to Peter? His life has been completely upended. He's left now with Mark Gaskill, who is, in the novel, not really a nice man. You're set up as the villain, but again, you don't get enough of a backstory to really buy it, especially when you get the big reveal. And Conway Jefferson, who is so entranced with Ruby Keene that he doesn't pay attention to the grandson who could be his right in front of him. And it is a tragedy, and all of that tragedy is just covered up by the he. Look, a lesbian affair.
That's the central fault of this show, and like you said, it was great up to that point.
Up until that last moment. Right up until that last moment. I could have accepted Mark Gaskill because that's the way the novel goes. I was already set up that way. And watching it a second time, and I just
So you watch it yourself, and you're going to have like 80 minutes of a great time.
Oh, yes, absolutely. 75 to 80 minutes of a great movie. Really looks good. My God, what a beautiful hotel. It's practically a residential hotel because you can live there and get all of your services taken care of and be entertained and have a constant parade of new guests to meet. Just wonderful scenery. But really, that ending was just completely out of left field. They didn't do one darn thing to set it up, not even so much as a longing glance between our two lead actresses who might as well have been on separate sets for all the attention they paid to each other.
Yeah. Well, so I think we've pretty much
beaten this dead horse, beaten this body in the library.
Yes, we've beaten the body in the library enough. It ain't going to be moving. It ain't going to get any colder. So let's go ahead and say goodbye and thank everybody for showing up and listening to us. Hit the like and subscribe button. Check out our books at peschelpress.com. Yes.
And remember, we have a newsletter, and also if you look at our website, when we do have events, and in 2023 we will certainly start having events, you can come out and meet us in person.
And we'll see you at the movies.
Bye-bye.
Agatha Christie, She Watched, is Teresa Peschel and Bill Peschel, produced by Bill Peschel. New episodes come out every week wherever you stream your content. If you enjoyed this podcast, you can help support us by going to anchor.fm/mystery and leaving a 5-star rating and review, and by helping to spread the word. To advertise on Mystery She Watched, email Peschel at peschelpress.com. All questions and comments can be emailed to Peschel at peschelpress.com. And thank you for listening.